92% of Americans believe that slavery no longer exists. Yet there are more people enslaved today than 200 years ago. They work in our fields, in our homes, in our hotels, and of course, in our brothels. And Houston is one of our nation's top cities for human trafficking. It's immoral, it's illegal, and it's a thriving business. Tonight, Houston's place in the world of human trafficking. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. Most people assume that slavery ended in the U.S. with the Civil War. But the fact is that this practice continues even today. Human trafficking, the trade or commerce of people, is alive and well, and Houston is one of our country's largest hubs for this illegal industry. Be it slavery, prostitution, forced labor, involuntary servitude, or the sale of babies and children for adoption, human trafficking is a growing crime with a high profit margin and a low risk of prosecution. With our diverse population, proximity to the border and ports, and access to many of our nation's major highways, Houston is ideal for entry and exportation of human traffic, both domestic and international. In 2007, 30% of the calls received by the National Human Trafficking Hotline originated in Texas, and 25% of all international victims were also located in our state. Immoral and illegal. Something needs to be done, and soon. Joining us tonight are Special Agent Maritza Conde Vasquez, Federal Bureau of Investigation; Charlotte Morris, Chair of the Coalition Against Human Trafficking of Houston; and Maria Trujillo, Executive Director, Houston Rescue and Restore Coalition. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
I want to start off with this trafficking, the slavery of people, in a sense. What is the terminology that we're using for this? When we say human traffic, what do we mean?
Human trafficking basically is what you just introduced the show with. It's slavery. It's a modern-day type of slavery. It's often confused with smuggling and other crimes dealing with illegal aliens, but the true human trafficking crime deals with the exploitation of human beings by use of fraud, force, or coercion to obtain labor or services.
Okay. Now, Charlotte, this is not just happening outside our country. It happens in the U.S. too, correct?
Absolutely. It's a borderless crime. It comes across borders. It happens within our own city, within our own daughters of our city. So it has people coming from out to within the city, and within the city from our own homes. Explain
that to me, Maria. I don't understand how in today's day and age, with the education we have, with the media we have, with the access through internet and cell phones, that people can be so cut off in our own community that they can get enslaved.
Well, it's an equal opportunity exploitation. The slavery of the past was very specific. And now many people are vulnerable, especially in times of recession and economic turmoil. People make, tough decisions, and they become more vulnerable because of their situation in terms of their need for, livelihood. And I think sometimes, and they also get manipulated, and people exploit that fear, that vulnerability, and take advantage of it.
Are you saying some people choose to go into this?
No, I think they are lied to, they're manipulated, and they are coerced based on their vulnerabilities of their economic situation, or it could just be a self-esteem exploitation. Young girls who have low self-esteem and who just really don't know that 30-year-old who's saying, "Hey, beautiful, why don't you come with me? I could be your father, I could be your boyfriend, I could be whoever you want me to be," that they get taken advantage of, and they fall into these horrible situations. It's falling down that rabbit hole, and they don't know how to get out.
Maritza, explain to me how it happens. Explain how people get enslaved, and especially right now I just want to focus, I guess, within our country.
Within our country, it speaks to what Maria was telling before. It's based on a vulnerability. Our youth are very vulnerable sometimes. They need attention. They need to be important to somebody. And then individuals, traffickers in these situations, exploit that vulnerability.
Right, but explain to me how that happens.
It happens for a combination of factors. You have a very young girl, in this case, who is needing attention because she ran away from home. Like, say, she doesn't have a place to stay, she doesn't have a place to live. Now she meets this guy, the trafficker, who offers her a place to live, who offers her food, clothing, and her basic needs. So does she really have a choice, being a runaway, without a home, without food and clothing to wear?
And if I understand from our research, too, that within 48 hours of running away from home, a trafficker has clung on to somebody.
Absolutely.
They're that quick. They're on top of this.
And the traffickers don't work alone. Don't think about the traffickers as mere individuals preying on individual victims. They work in groups. They target young women with other young women. Let's say a victim of trafficking that is already within the pimp's or the trafficker hands, it's been with him for over 3, 4, 5 years. That girl now has a status within the trafficking system. And then that girl is used to recruit new females.
Okay, how do we get to that point then? What happens in the mind of the trafficked individual that they think, you know what, I'm in this now, I'm going to help bring in others? How does that mindset happen, Charlotte?
For a variety of ways and reasons. One is survival. Absolute survival. If they've been in that long, they see what can happen. The traffickers are very barbaric. They beat them, not just once, but daily, and they beat them for their quotas to make sure that they're making the money they're supposed to, whether they're sick or not. And they have learned. They've been brainwashed, they've been drugged and become dependent on drugs, but they've learned to be dependent on that trafficker for everything they need in life because he has a hold on them. He tells them when they can go where and what they can do. And outside of what he allows, they can do nothing. So they've become dependent on him, and to get a higher status with him, to be his favorite, maybe to get their nails done or to get something that they want, they need to cooperate and become that recruiter. It becomes a survival.
Okay, now I heard somewhere in our research, too, that in the days of slavery in this country, as we think back in the 1800s, that to buy an African slave would cost, by today's standards, roughly $40,000. In that same adjusted economy today, to buy a human slave, it costs about $300. That it's much cheaper now, that we think slavery is all in the past, but it's more prevalent, it's cheaper, it's coming in, and these are also the people we bring in from other countries and all this. Is this accurate?
Absolutely. It's much cheaper to have and possess a slave than it was ever during the legal slave trade. Back in the legal slave trade, it was a status symbol. You actually treated your slaves with a little bit more respect, sort of, because you paid a lot of money to have a slave. Now, slaves are disposable people. They are so cheap to obtain that after you're done with them, you literally can dispose of them. And it's such a growing industry because it's low risk and it's high reward. Slaves are things that you could sell over and over and over again. It's much more profitable than drugs and arms, and that's why it's the fastest growing criminal industry out there.
It requires a very minimal investment. When you think of it, many of the cases that we've prosecuted within the Houston area are based in traffickers who meet their victims, make them fall in love with them, make them loyal to them, and then they are forced into prostitution. What the trafficker invested in there, his time, maybe, the food that he's given to the victims, maybe a house, but he needs a house to live anyways. So really the investment, it's very small. Most of the victims were only fed once a day.
Now, when they're doing that, too, I assume they are working on more than one slave at a time also. So
Absolutely.
It's, in a sense, very cost-effective for them. Mm-hmm. I also hear prosecution is very hard in this area. True or false, and why would it be?
Well, every case is different. We will really need to look at the facts. But human trafficking, it's very difficult to identify to begin with. It's often a crime that happens within an enclosed environment, in brothels. Okay, those victims, tense victims, tense clients, I may say. Customers meet them. But customers only see one face of those victims. They see the prostitute who is offering sexual services. They don't see this person as a victim, so they don't know how to recognize it. When we move in an investigation, of course, you have to corroborate the victim's story. So you need to interview people. And when you interview people and all the interviews are coming back saying, oh, she was there, she was offering her sexual services willingly, voluntarily, it's very hard to convince then a jury, no, that was not voluntary. And then you need to bring to life the story of that victim.
Now, I don't want people to think that the only way that people are enslaved in this country is through the sex trade, that they are used as domestics, they are used in field work and all of that. How does all of that play out?
There's a great deal of intersection between them. Since 80% of people enslaved are women, there is a cross-section because women are almost all the time also sex slaves. Whatever they're called to do in the labor field, whether it's in industry and in factories or massage, they are also sex slaves to their captors. So there's a dual role there where they're pulled into labor. Labor is our greatest cost in America, and money is the root of all slavery. Power and money together, because if you have no labor costs, then your business is going to thrive. Mm-hmm. And so labor is a huge, and we see more labor cases in Houston than straight sex cases because of the almighty dollar, and because we want to make money without spending money. And that's...
Yep, labor trafficking is definitely something that is important to make sure people are aware of. Like you said, it's not just about the sex industry, but there is a huge side of labor trafficking as well. One story I just wanted to quickly bring up is of a Baptist minister who brought a boys' choir from Zambia and promised, the small village, the parents of these boys, that they were going to go to Texas and raise all this money for a school and provide education to these boys and provide money to this village. And so they let their boys go, and this boys' choir traveled from church to church throughout the state of Texas, raising lots of money from congregations who believed in the so-called cause that they were that he was presenting. And in fact, the boys were fed maybe once a day. They were kept captured when they weren't singing. They were doing 7 concerts a day at times. They weren't getting an education, and none of the money was going back to the village in Zambia. So that's a very specific case of labor trafficking and with children.
Okay, and I don't know exactly how to ask this question so as not to offend someone along the way, but how do you separate out what is slavery from what is just really poor business practice? And I know it sounds rough to say it that way, but okay, so you bring these kids here and you tour them around and they've come to sing. They are singing. There is money being generated. Maybe the profits aren't as high as had hoped. How do you then separate from bad business to slavery?
We make the differentiation using and going back to the human trafficking legal definition. Human trafficking, it's compel the service of labor of a human being by fraud, force, or coercion. We need to have one of those elements along with the labor or service part for it to be human trafficking. We're not talking about a case that, let's say you come to me and offer me a job here at the studio, and I say, no, I really don't want to work for you. And you say, no, Maritza, you really need to work for me, because if you don't work for me, maybe I can go around the community and say that you're not reputable, that you're a liar. And then I go back and think and say, well, I'm going to go and work with you because I don't want to face that risk. I had that choice. I faced the risk of being non-reputable in the community and not work with you, or I face the risk of working with you on your conditions. That is not human trafficking. Human trafficking is when you take the choice away from me. When you tell me, Maritza, you need to work with me because I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to turn you into authorities. I'm going to say that you stole from me. I have every element to prove it. Or simply you threaten my family. You tell me, Maritza, you're going to work for me because I'm going to go to Puerto Rico, which is where I'm from, and kill your mother. That is human trafficking. You see, it's force, fraud, and coercion.
Also, because of where we're located and the issues that we have with immigrant workers who come into this country, maybe not documented as they should be, and then there's the fear of exportation, or there's the fear that, they have shamed someone in some way, and they get into these systems. Talk a little bit about the unique situations we face here in Houston, and I'll open that to any of you.
I think the face of deportation, especially within the illegal immigrant community, it's very, very big. They often don't come forward being victims of human trafficking because they fear authorities won't believe them, because they fear authorities will deport them, and they don't want to face that risk. And they are victimized, horribly exploited beyond reasonable means, and horrible stories.
Is it a problem within our own society that we sometimes feel, well, they're undocumented, they shouldn't be here in the first place? Is there a callousness that comes from our own culture?
That's a great weakness in Houston, because we have a great immigration population, and there are so many debates on both sides of immigration here. Many think of it as an illegal alien coming in, and some people think they deserve what they get, and that is so not true. We have the basic right of freedom for all people. We are all created equal, and the humanization of how we're treated. When they are dehumanized and exploited over and over, that's where slavery is, and that's where we need to know the difference between smuggling, between migrant workers, between illegal aliens, and human trafficking victims. They are victims. They're not criminals. They may have made a choice in the very beginning that they wanted to be smuggled here, or they wanted to come and work and provide a life for their family back home. Somebody defrauded them, exploited that desire and the vulnerabilities that Maritza spoke to, and used that against them. And then they become a victim. Anybody that is a victim, we have a duty as a community to take care of that person. To care, because we have a central truth amongst all of us in our city that everybody should have the right to freedom and the right to be treated like a human.
Beyond that, I do want to point out that legally we're bound to protect everybody within U.S. soil. The Constitution of the United States protects all individuals, not only citizens, all individuals, and offer the equal rights to everybody on U.S. soil. The fact that a person is not a legal immigrant or is not a U.S. citizen does not preclude them from offering that information to law enforcement and giving us the opportunity to protect them and prosecute whoever victimized that person.
Mm-hmm. I also, before we run out of time in the conversation, want to bring up the fact that it does happen to men also. It's not just to women. It happens to boys, as you mentioned in your story. There are ways to recognize this behavior going on. I think we're all exposed to it. I was watching an interview with a gentleman who said he always went to the same Asian restaurant. And these wait staff, he just assumed, were family members, the kids that were waiting on him. Later on, there was a sting operation that came in, and he found out, no, those kids that had been working there were illegal immigrants. What are things we can watch for, to know, to be aware that this is going on?
I always ask people to, just open their eyes to the situation. If you see people that are not making eye contact or looking down, seem kind of fearful, or seem like they're controlled by someone else. For example, when you go get your nails done, I always asking questions like, "Oh, how long have you been here? How do you enjoy the city? Where did you come from?" Different things like that. How do you like your job? And see what kind of reaction I get, and see if it seems like they are told not to speak to me, if they are afraid to talk, and that's in any situation. It doesn't have to just be a nail salon. So those types of things. If they don't seem to have control over their own identity, their paperwork, those are some signs.
Let me stop you right there and take you back for a second, because I'm thinking a lot of people are watching this and saying right now, well, they're having interaction with the outside community. Tell someone and leave with them. Why can't they just do that?
Let me give you an example from one of our actual cases. One victim was trying to escape from her trafficker. Her trafficker told her once, "I'm going to go back to your country and I'm going to find your little girl and I'm going to kill her." And she didn't believe him at first. Oh, no, he wouldn't do that. What turned out to be that trafficker went back to her country and talked to her mother, the victim's mother. She was taking care of the little girl. And she told the victim's mother, "I want you to take a photo of the little girl with me, giving this gift to her, because her mom sent this gift to her from Houston, and I want to be able to show her that I gave her what she sent." And sure enough, the victim's mother took a photo, and when the trafficker came back to Houston, threw the photo on top of the desk in front of the victim and told her, "That's so you know I can get to her whenever I want." Under those circumstances, Would you go back to your country? Would you escape? Would you risk it?
So how do they ever get out of it then? If that's the case, well, all right, now the FBI comes in and says, okay, you've been human trafficked, I'm going to help get you out. That fear's still got to be there. And as you said before, there are these networks of traffickers, so even if my captor gets prosecuted, what's going to happen to my child still? So
and that fear's still with them. They cooperated with us. It took us a long time to gain their trust and to let them know we are going to make this situation the best possible for you, and you are safe now. It's not an easy task for law enforcement going to these victims and having them open up and telling you their stories, because all of those fears. So to answer your question, we work a lot with those victims in trying to gain their trust. If you don't gain the trust of your victims, you're not going anywhere. The fear is just too heavy.
Charlotte, for a minute, take me back and give me some more signs of how I know, or how I should be aware, what I should watch out for to know if I'm in proximity of someone who's being enslaved.
Like many of the things Maria said, being aware of their surroundings, ask them, where do they sleep? How do they get back and forth to work? Do they communicate with their family back home in their country or even in this country? Because domestics are a huge problem here, and we can't overlook that just talking about internationals. Our own citizens are enslaved. But finding out their freedom of movement, did you go see a movie? Or just basic things you can ask about what we do every day, going out, being with friends, going to see family. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
So the enslaved people pretty much do not have a social life outside of just doing what their task is, correct?
No.
So if you get messages back from them that say either they don't answer the questions, or they can't tell you these answers, or they don't visit their family, they don't talk to their family, those should be red flags.
Absolutely.
And especially when you encounter minors in prostitution, many of our community, most of our community would, have some compassion to them, but would say, oh, they're runaways, they're not going to be good, they're not going to ever be safe. That is human trafficking right there. Minors in prostitution are always victims of human trafficking. Minors working at restaurants, like you just mentioned before, that should be a huge red flag. That boy or little girl needs to be at school. They don't need to be working in a restaurant. That is a red flag.
When should I know that I should say something, and who do I say something to, and when should I mind my own business?
We all have a conscience. There's that internal piece of you that says, something's not right. I don't know what it is. And it's not your job to go and investigate. Don't do that. You want to keep your own safety and your family's safety at heart. So don't investigate. Be vigilant, but not a vigilante.
So what do you
don't know to go against it. We have a national tip line that we encourage everybody to call, and that's the one you referred to earlier. And it's 1-888-3737-888. This number provides a hotline just for human trafficking. We have many languages available through that hotline, but they take all of the calls for tips, and across the United States, they filter it back to the appropriate authorities in that area. Because trafficking, although it doesn't require any movement, it could take place within one room. You don't have to move people, but it is a very mobile crime. And part of their crime is dependent on that mobility in ways they want them to always be disoriented, not to connect to friends, not have the same customer all the time in any situation so that you become familiar with that person. So they will move them around the country, around the city, sell them to other people. And so that national hotline is important because we can get tips from all places and start to piece it together and see the movement of the same descriptive people and what's going on in the same situation. So the national hotline is very important.
On the local level, our FBI office here in Houston has a 24/7 phone number. It's 713-693-5000. We have several linguists available. If the victim or the person that is going to offer the information doesn't speak English, we'll take care of that. And the best advice I can give the community, if they have any kind of information that they believe or suspect that it might be human trafficking, and they don't have to be sure. Like Charlotte said before, they don't have to conduct investigations.
Right.
That's what we're here for. We need to let them know through your show, and I thank you for it. Call us. We'll do the work that we're paid to do. We go ahead, we'll check the information out. If it pans out and it's human trafficking, great. If it's not, we're not going to go back and tell you, why did you call? Right. We always welcome phone calls from the public.
And Maria, before we run out of time too, rehabilitating these poor people that have been enslaved. It can be done.
It can be done. It is happening. We in Houston have some really great service providers with the YMCA International and Catholic Charities who do a lot of great work in rehabilitating these victims of human trafficking, so they are now survivors of trafficking. They provide the mental care, the health care that they need, education, job training, ESL language training if that's necessary. So they both provide a very holistic approach to rehabilitation.
So if you happen to be watching this right now and you are in one of these situations, know to call these numbers we've talked about.
Absolutely.
Know that there will be help coming and that you can be brought back into the community and not to fear. And so hopefully maybe we'll reach somebody with the show tonight too.
I just want them to have the opportunity and give themselves the opportunity to have their freedom back, their choice back. And the community out there who identify a person that is going through that situation to give that individual the opportunity
and with that,
to have their choice
I thank
back.
you all for coming in. We are out of time. Remember, each week we invite you to join us online at HoustonPBS.org. You can simply click on the local programs bar, then pick Houston 8, and you can join our online community. Read more about the guests, learn about the topic, share your thoughts and ideas, and even suggest questions that we might ask during upcoming episodes. Remember, information posted on our website may be used on air, so keep that in mind when submitting. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for watching, and have a great week.